All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook. In this podcast, I dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us. In today's episode, I'm talking with Dr. Nick Jewell, the group leader of Electric Distribution Emerging Technology Engineering at Louisville Gas Electric. We discussed the impact the rapid increase in electric vehicles and other DER may have on the power grid and how strategic planning can smooth this transition. From an innovative solar program to working cooperatively with local companies, we dig into a variety of ways to identify new opportunities and limit potential threats to the ever-increasing DER demands on the power grid. So before we kick off and kind of discuss, our opportunities and challenges, could you give a little bit of insight of what makes up your company and kind of where do you sit in regards to like utility structure?
Yeah, so LGDKU is a vertically integrated investor-owned utility. PPL is our parent company, Pennsylvania Power and Light. And I sit on the electric distribution side of our business. So being vertically integrated, we have generation, transmission, and distribution all the way down to the customer. So I sit on the electric distribution side. Prior to joining that, I was actually in our R&D group for 5 years. And in that role, I spent a lot of time looking into a lot of these emerging technologies that we're actually implementing and integrating on our system today. So my group, as you mentioned, the Emerging Technology Engineering Group, we are responsible for all of the DER interconnections on the system. So we do all the technical reviews and modeling associated with those. We also keep track of electric vehicles, where they're registered, and then other, emerging projects that may be a little more advanced for some of our systems. So our group handles those moving forward.
So like for a lot of the discussions that we get into at AEIC, I think the idea that here is DER coming fast, right? New technology, new innovation, new ways of thinking of how the grid can and should respond to the ultimate customer's desires. And so it really impacts not only the operations group or not only the planning group. And you mentioned interconnection, right? So really from the moment a customer wants to engage with this new technology, you have your interconnections. And I just kind of want to highlight to our listeners, one common theme is when we're a part of this community, this industry of like understanding DER, we really are working with all facets of the company, right? So like you kind of mentioned, like you're working within the planning and the interconnection, the how's impact operations, and really, what is the approach that you ultimately take on that technology? So yes, very exciting. And I always love to meet fellow industry members in this area. So I think this is gonna be a great conversation for today.
Sounds
I'll
good.
just tee up. What do you foresee, as those opportunities as well as challenges as we do this transition to clean energy resources at the edge, and how it's changing the system that you're, in control of to ultimately the ultimate design?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the opportunities. So I'll always start with the positive, is what I've always been told. So I guess the first thing that comes to mind is as this technology rolls out across our system, it provides us the ability to make long-term planning decisions on our system to be able to increase the hosting capacity for these resources. That's kind of a unique situation. I mean, a lot of times we're thrown these technologies and we have to integrate them immediately. But as we can kind of see this coming, and I'll talk about this a little bit, but since we can kind of see this coming, we can actually make long-term plans and strategic plans to make sure that we integrate these appropriately and make sure our system can host them. So to that point, Kentucky actually lags behind the national averages on adoption, and that's for intermittent renewable generation such as solar or inverter-based resources like energy storage. And then even electric vehicles, we lag behind our neighboring states in this region. So that's a blessing in disguise, because we can actually learn from our peers to see what are those best practices on getting these things integrated on our system. Another opportunity is that we're currently in the process of rolling out a volt-var optimization program, or VVO. This is giving us SCADA capable controls on all of our voltage control assets across multiple circuits. And we can use that to actually increase the hosting capacity for these intermittent resources on the system. So that'll play hand in hand there. We also have a DMS that we recently stood up over the last few years. And through that distribution management system, we're able to integrate the DER into that model. So as it calculates the state estimation of the system, we're able to take into account that distributed generation and see how that affects the power flows across the system. And this would probably be a common theme from talking to other utilities too, but we've used these technologies and actually created new customer programs for our customers. We have a community solar project called Solar Share. It's a 4 megawatt project where customers can buy basically individual panels. Those are the shares of those sites. So instead of paying the upfront capital cost to install these on your own roof, and maybe you have an HOA that doesn't allow you to do that, you can buy into the Solar Share program, and those energy credits actually get applied right to your electric bill. So it's a fairly popular program, especially for those customers that are wanting to go green. We've actually had some industrial and commercial customers enroll in this program as well. Another related program is EV charging hosting. So we offer level 2 EV charging infrastructure as a hosted program for some customers. But we're also looking at expanding that currently to a DC fast charging capability as well. So as that technology changes, we're trying to keep up with that technology and make sure we offer those to our customers.
I guess I just want to cue in a few things that you said. One common misconception, I think, just one, change is occurring. And as humans and human behavior, we do not like change. So this idea that we have to rethink how we currently plan and operate the grid is quite an upheaval, right? And what I heard you say is that Kentucky lags and from other states in the industry grids, but really it doesn't matter if you lag, because if you have to integrate one, you have to have the expertise, the technical acumen, and the capability to do so. So if you have one, you can get by, but knowing it's coming, that preparatory work, which seems to be your group, right? Really trying to position yourselves to prepare for. I've been kind of in this world 18 years. And I remember when transmission and distribution, the line grade about 8 years ago, and then plenty of conversation around when is the right time. So from your experience and how quickly these projects arrive, do you believe that, getting positioned and started before the proliferation is a benefit to really the customer in the end, for the utility to take that seat or that position?
I think it definitely does. Because like I said, learning those best practices from our peers does allow us to provide that least cost, most reliable option to our customers to be able to support their needs. So I think that's the important part. And when I say that we lag behind, I mean, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. If we have one, we have to know how to integrate it. It's not that we wait until some magic number of 1,000 of these things or something like that. It's just the fact that you don't really start to see a lot of the common issues until you see these higher penetrations in small geographic areas. So that's where we're able to kind of take those best practices and adapt our system to best host those.
Right, and that kind of leads into your actual challenges, right, or your threats to how we continuously serve, this reliable, safe, affordable power to our customer. As they're rapidly changing, we have to change with them. So there are negative impacts, but we just have to understand them, learn from them, and then design, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I mean that's the first thing I have here that comes to mind when I think of threats, is just that potential for localized negative effects on power quality due to that intermittent resource, whether that's a generation resource or a load resource like electric vehicle charging. Any rapid changes in load in a small geographic area or maybe on a specific circuit, if you want to speak in terms of electrical language here, those changes can affect voltage. You might have flicker, you might have voltage swings, things like that affect your neighboring customers. In fact, we've had a couple instances where customers, because of the way that we have a capacitor switched or something like that, they're seeing high voltage, and therefore it's kicking their inverter offline. So those are things that we're having to learn from, and make sure that we adjust our own operations so that we're not negatively impacting the customers. There's a few other kind of threats that come to mind. I guess first from a generation standpoint. So rooftop solar. To date, we have tried to prevent reverse power flow at the transmission point of interconnection, primarily just because that eases the modeling and the relaying and protection requirements on the transmission side. However, it's going to be inevitable. Eventually, we're going to reach that point where we are going to see reverse power flows at the transmission level, even though we don't see those today. So that's definitely something that is a potential threat on how we operate our business today, and we're going to need to adapt. We realize that. Another thing, I guess, looking more at the load side, and this is something that I guess one of my fellow colleagues at another utility, they've referred to electric vehicles as the next air conditioning. But basically, electric vehicles are changing not only the way we serve load to our customers, but also, I mean, just things as simple as how buildings are designed, how parking lots are designed. We're starting to see more EV charging infrastructure in parking lots where people want to offer that to their customers, or to their employees as a benefit.
And I think we probably had the same colleague that said that. I remember, I'm like, that's a great analogy. And another, I guess, with the whole air conditioning and then AV being the next air conditioning is, we as an industry for the last 40 years have been like designing and driving and educating energy efficiency programs. So our overall load growth has really been a load flattening or even a decline in some areas. Some other areas have seen the growth, but like it's a change in how we think and plan just for the fact that now we're growing at levels that we haven't really seen in a couple decades.
Exactly. Yeah. For the longest time, and we have had very flat load growth, especially in our service area. We feel that EVs are going to be that next wave that potentially provides some load growth. However, I'll caution you, because the reason I have this listed as a potential threat is when you have that rapid electrification that occurs, when you have these large fleets of vehicles. So your delivery services, the UPSs, the FedExes of the world, as they start to electrify their fleets, that's going to have a huge impact, especially in those localized regions, because EV charging is very intermittent. It's not a constant load, and that's something that it's very hard to plan for. So unless you have a managed charging program, it's something that you kind of have to build the infrastructure to be able to handle the worst case scenario. And for these large fleets, that can be very costly.
They're very costly, and to whom? And I think also when we speak infrastructure, it seems to be the buzzword of this year, with the infrastructure plan. We have to also think about not only the infrastructure of the wires and the transformers and the cables that like allow the electrons to flow, but the infrastructure of the communication, the sensing devices, how we're measuring and bringing that data back, and the whole technology platforms to be able to manage that. And you said that, right? Like developing the capability to manage the load at the edge. So really having that visibility, and that's new, for really across the industry, even for those that have seen solar proliferate, we're all kind of still in that journey. So yeah, it's definitely, when we talk about infrastructure, it's not just the physical, right? It's the technology platforms too, which you spoke of, earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. And on that point, I mean, I'm sure if you watch the Super Bowl or any TV commercials nowadays, all you see are the commercials for electric vehicles, and that wave is coming. It's just a matter of time. And especially as we see more trucks and SUVs, which tend to be more popular here in Kentucky, as we see more offerings in that region start to come out, I think we'll really see the growth take off. I think the one thing that really kind of worries me right now, I won't say it keeps me up at night, but it's something that I definitely think about, is bidirectional EV charging. Because now EVs, especially this Ford F-150 Lightning that they're advertising, they're showing bidirectional charging where you can use the vehicle to provide backup power to your home during a grid outage. And the problem is we have, as a company, we have a method in place to handle DER interconnections, but those DER interconnections are more generation focused. So if the customer is strictly only putting in a bidirectional EV charger, that doesn't count on our system. So there's nothing that requires them to notify us about that. And there's no way for us to really verify from a technical perspective that it meets our interconnection requirements. So that is something that we really need to kind of work on here, because again, that technology is right around the corner. I mean, there's already vendors out there that offer that technology, and it's just a matter of time before we start seeing our own customers put these things in.
And I guess I would just ask, with all of this opportunity and challenges that are ahead of us, what are some innovative solutions that you guys have really been engaged on and developing and working on in your world?
Yeah. So just a few things, and this is something that's kind of been driven by a new FERC reliability guideline that was published. But we are, when we do our annual data request for transmission and provide them our load forecast data, up until now we have grouped in all this, the distributed generation, into that load forecast. So it's been more of a net load forecast. However, moving forward, we're going to start forecasting distributed generation separately from the load. So that's down to the transformer level in the substation. We're forecasting that growth out 10 years, so that we can start thinking about that and seeing how that really affects systems a little more holistically. I mentioned the solar share facility. So right now it's a 4 megawatt planned facility. We have 2 megawatts already built out. We're building those as we get people subscribed to it, and we've seen exponential growth in that program here recently. So it's just a matter of time, and we're going to start seeing more of these community solar programs across our area. I mentioned we're, from the EV standpoint, we're starting to look towards DC fast charging capability. We've had a bunch of customers reach out to us about this, and we've actually been doing our homework, looking into the technology and seeing if we can actually host some of these ourselves as utility hosted sites, but also offer these as a service to our customers if that's something that they want. And then on the EV electrification standpoint too, we've actually started reaching out to some of our larger fleet operators. So that's the school systems, logistics companies like the UPSs, Amazons, and then also just other large companies like the metro governments and things like that across our area, just to try to determine what their long-term electrification plans are. Like you mentioned, this federal infrastructure funding is now available, and we want to make sure that as our customers decide to go electric for their transportation needs, that our system can handle it. Because when you get these larger fleets of tens or maybe even hundreds of vehicles, I mean, you're talking about easily megawatts of load overnight that could be added. So we're starting to kind of reach out, do more of a manual process, a kind of a grassroots project here, just to see who's planning what, when they're planning it, so that we can try to build that into our own internal planning processes. Because if we need to make substation upgrades or harden our circuits to be able to handle that, it'd be better to kind of spread that out over time instead of trying to do it overnight, especially in today's environment where it's not easy to get materials nowadays.
Yeah, I was at the Alliance for Transportation Electrification. They had a in-person committee, and they were talking about these large loads for the fleets. And it's definitely, I think what it's doing for all of us is really exasperating this need and drive for the utility to take that innovative entrepreneurial position, which is not really where we've been for the last 50 years, to really drive this new technology, this new data analytics and awareness for us to be able to handle all of those things that are coming at us. And I just want to say, thank you so much for attending and sharing. And I look forward to continue to contribute to this topic with you at the AEIC. With that, any last words for our audience or anything you want to shout out?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation here, and as like you said, I'll be at the AEIC DER subcommittee meeting. So if anybody does have questions about any of those specific programs that I mentioned, I'm here to help out wherever. So
that's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Until then, keep powering on.